All right, we're now being recorded. I'd like to welcome everyone to our Wednesday webinar. We have these the second and fourth Wednesday of each month. The blue link here, extension.umd.edu/women-in-ag, is where you can find previously recorded webinars as well as upcoming ones. This one today is what specialty crop enterprise is right for you. And later this month, we'll be having a risk management for food entrepreneurs, and then one in April on legal implications of pesticide drift. So feel free to go online. You can register and learn a little bit more about the webinars that we'll be hosting. Another big thank you for the success of the 2018 Mid-Atlantic Women in Ag Conference. And we do still have one Annie's Project class that's taking registration, and that's in Central Maryland, located in Westminster. So if anyone's interested in Annie's Project, we do have one in Western Maryland that will be happening. As always, a big thank you to our sponsors of the Women in Agriculture program, and then I'd also like to recognize the collaborators on this program. With that, I'm going to move the presentation to Nia Little. She is our presenter today, and we'll be talking about specialty crops. Nia?
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you for having me as part of the Women in Agriculture webinar series. So my name is Nia Little. I work for University of Maryland Extension as an agricultural extension agent for urban farmers, particularly in Baltimore City. And I'm going to be working with you today on assessing potential specialty crop enterprises learning and teaching you how to use a tool called a SWOT analysis. This webinar will not be about any one specialty crop in particular, but I will have some resources at the end about where you can learn more about different specialty crops. This webinar is also based on a training that we developed, Shannon and Emily Zobel and I together, that was at the Mid-Atlantic Women in Agriculture Conference this winter. So we might have some other webinars that use material from that training in the future. First off, I'd like to plug the Beginning Farmer Success website. I'll give you a link to that in my few other resources, but it's a really great resource for beginning farmers in particular. It has a lot of information written at a very accessible level. And that picture that you can see with the pencil that says First Steps to Farming, if you go to the website and click that link, that has a lot of the resources that I use to develop this exercise. It has the Beginning Farmer Business Planning Guidebook and a case study that Shannon Bill and Ben Beal developed of a vegetable farm that I used to pull information from for the exercise we're going to be using today. So the question that this webinar is about is, what do you produce as a farmer? And figuring out what is right for you and your farm to produce is not really a linear process. You do a lot of exploring of different options, and it's a good idea to start small, experiment a little bit in small areas, in small ways, maybe a small percentage of your land area, so that you don't go all in before you start figuring things out and figuring out what's going to work for you. And you also need to think about, when you're assessing what enterprise is right for you, both a lot of different variables. Your goals and what you're passionate about, so why you're farming in the first place, your skills that you bring to the table, whether that's from farming or from previous jobs or education, the resources that you have, the land that you have, what it's compatible to produce. For example, if you have a heavy clay soil with lots of rocks in it, producing annual crops may not be the best option for you. It might, for that soil, a more perennial or even pasture might be the best use of that land. And market demand is kind of king. If you can't sell what you produce, you can't really have a business. You can have a hobby farm, which is absolutely an acceptable goal to have for quality of life. If that's what you want to do, that's a fantastic goal. But if you're trying to do something as a business to make income, you really need to consider the market demand and what people will buy and whether they will buy what you are selling at a high enough price to pay for your cost of production and pay you a wage. So let's think about your goals and your resources. It's important to think about your personal goals and your family as well. What's going to work for your family. I've heard many farmers say that they got a lot better at managing their time actually after they had kids, because then they were able to prioritize getting things done when they needed to get them done so they could spend time with their family. So if you have young children that you need to make time for, if you have older children who are interested in taking over the farm, thinking about those goals while you're assessing what enterprises you're going to produce is important. Your financial goals are important. Like we talked about just a minute ago, is this a hobby? Is this a business? How much money do you need to make? Do you just need to cover your expenses so that you can continue doing it as a hobby? Or do you need to make income so that you can afford to spend your time on it rather than having a full-time job off the farm? Do you need to produce enough income to support one spouse while the other one works off the farm? Do you need to produce enough income to support 2 generations so you can finance transfer of the farm to the next generation? So identify what your financial goals are, and think about your community goals as well. What is it? A lot of people have goals for wanting to produce healthy, delicious food for their community, and so how does that fit in with what enterprise you choose? And think about your long-term goals and your short-term goals. Again, what do you want to do this year in the next 5 years, and what do you want this business to look like in the future? Do you want this to be something you can pass on to your children? And then how does farming fit in with all of these goals? And always go back to that question of why are you farming in the first place? The enterprise you produce, it should be something you're interested in, but it also should serve the reason you're farming, whether that is for quality of life or for making income or for some other reason. What does a successful farm mean to you? I think we talked about a lot on the previous slide. I think I covered this already. I'm sorry. So when you're assessing what to produce, there are a lot of resources available to help you find more information. I'm going to give you a list of more resources at the end of this presentation. You need to look at the market demand, what people will pay for, your land compatibility, your passion, your skill, and then once you've gathered some information about all of these goals and your resources, you can start to narrow down different enterprises and assess different enterprises using a tool called a SWOT analysis. That SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And this will then feed into your business plan. And some people think about a business plan as something you produce for other people, like you write a business plan so you can take it to a lender. But a business plan is also a tool for you to work through the nitty-gritty of your business and of your enterprise and start running up against those barriers on paper before you run up against them in real life. So you can, going back to this SWOT analysis that is the focus of today, you can do a SWOT analysis for your whole farm, or you can do it for an individual product, and that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to do a SWOT analysis for a specific product. And if you are farming at a small scale, it's important to consider niche markets and high-value crops and products, and that's where we're getting into specialty crops a lot of people are interested in. So specialty crops, I should probably back up, are defined as essentially anything that is not a commodity crop. A commodity crop is something that's sold on the commodity market, like grain or milk. So specialty crops are things like pretty much all fruits and vegetables are considered specialty crops unless they're sold by contract for canning purposes. I think they're still considered specialty crops then. So specialty crops are essentially all fruits and vegetables, and then the more unusual things like herbs, like agritourism, make your own pumpkins could be considered a specialty crop. Cut flowers are a specialty crop, things like that. Mushrooms. So let's get into this tool, this SWOT analysis. So a SWOT analysis is essentially a way to kind of put down on paper and help organize your thoughts about your farms and your team's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats as it relates to this enterprise that you're considering. So in the case study we're going to be using, we're going to look at raspberries as a specialty crop. So this farmer needs to think about their internal strengths as a farmer, so in relation to this potential specialty crop of raspberries. The strengths and the weaknesses, those are considered things that are internal to you, and the opportunities and threats are considered things that are external to your farm, and we'll get into them in a little bit more detail now. So strengths, that's about what resources you have on your team and on your farm. They're the people, they're you, your spouse, your business partners, your farming partners, your children, and they're the skills that you bring to the table. And then there's the physical strengths that you have and resources that you have on your farm, the land and the soil, the equipment, the buildings, the infrastructure, the climate that you're in, your access to water if you have a well or if you have municipal water, if you, things like that, things you bring to the table as a team and as a farm. Think about the skills that you have, what you already know from your previous career. Even if you are new to farming, maybe you worked in sales, so you have good sales and marketing skills, or maybe you worked in accounting, so you're good at the numbers. And then think about merging into the weaknesses. What do you need to learn more about? And are there resources around you to help learn those new skills? I'd like to hope that Extension can be one of those resources. And are there people around you who already know those skills? Other members of your family and your team, other farmers who you might connect with, other members of your community. So thinking about the weaknesses, again, these are internal to you, your team, and your farm. What do you need to be aware of and then compensate for? And what might rule out some enterprises versus other enterprises, things like perhaps non-farm responsibilities, although that could be considered a strength as well. Perhaps one spouse or business farming partner has a full-time job off the farm. That could be considered a weakness in that it takes up a lot of time, but it also could be considered strength in that it brings in income and brings in potentially healthcare, which is really hard to find when you're a farmer sometimes. We also have webinars on healthcare. If you're interested, I'm going to be part of some of them too, I think, or I'm helping view a pilot of them soon. Sorry, back to this. So then think about gaps in your training and knowledge, gaps in what you know already. So say you have some farming experience, but maybe you haven't ever driven a tractor or maintained farm equipment. That might be a piece of knowledge that you need to learn more about. Or if you really are worried about it, maybe you would decide to choose an enterprise that doesn't require you to invest in heavy equipment yet. Also consider the size that you're working with. If you're farming at a large scale, there are different enterprises that make sense for you as opposed to if you're farming at a small scale. If you've got 100 to 1,000 acres, then maybe growing vegetables for contract to sell to a wholesaler or to freeze, you know, for the green giants, things like that. That's a possibility at the large scale. At the smaller scale, the prices that a wholesaler is going to pay you for fruits and vegetables just will probably not be high enough to pay for your cost of production and pay you and your family a living wage, just because you don't have those economies of scale. Your location is really important too. Your location could be a strength or a weakness. If you're located near an urban area or in an urban area, land prices might be very high, but then so that might make it difficult to get access to much land. But then being located in or near an urban area could be a strength because then you're very close to the market that you would sell your produce to. Similarly, if you're in a rural area, the opposite applies. You might be farther from large markets, but you might have less pressure on the prices of land, so you might have lower taxes that you have to pay. So now we're getting into the opportunities and threats, and these are things that are considered to be external to your farm. So what are the opportunities that you can capitalize on? Things like those nearby markets, like Washington, D.C. Is not in your farm, but there's a lot of people there who might buy your produce. The labor force is external to your farm, so are there people nearby that you might be able to hire to work on your farm? Market desire for different things, what people want to buy, that's an external opportunity for you to take advantage of. And then there are other funding sources, like grants or low-interest loans from the USDA Farm Service Agency or from other sources of funding. Threats are roadblocks that come up that are external to you. Remember, a weakness is something like maybe you don't know how to drive a tractor. A threat might be a hurricane coming in and damaging your crop, or competition from a saturated market. Maybe you decide that everyone is selling this specialty crop right now, so maybe it's not a good idea to do cut flowers, but maybe no one is growing edible flowers yet, something like that. Diseases are a particularly important one to consider when you're considering different enterprises and different crops. Some crops tend to be a little more disease prone than others. For example, I'm more of a plants person than a livestock person, I'll admit, so things like tomatoes are incredibly stickly plants. They get a lot of diseases, and there's not a lot of tools. There are tools to treat them, but some of them, once the tomato gets the disease, it just dies. Peaches are another one that get a lot of diseases, and if being an organic farmer is really important to you, if using organic methods is really important to you, one thing you can do is learn and be really good at the organic methods of controlling pests and diseases and preventing them. But another thing you can do is just choose crops that are less prone to diseases. So if you're a very beginning farmer and you're just learning and you want to be an organic farmer, peaches might not be the crop for you because they're very, very hard to grow organically successfully and have a peach that looks beautiful and delicious and people want to eat. And an apple orchard a peach orchard is a huge investment and takes a lot of time to grow until you can start selling things. So consider things like that about the crop that you're considering, the enterprise that you're considering. All right, so now we're going to you're going to get a chance to start thinking about this in terms of a case study. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to give you some information about a fictional farm. And then I'd like to have you use the chat box to work through an exercise. And you'll also have a worksheet for this exercise that you can then take home and use for your farm and the enterprises that you are considering once you've learned how to use it doing this exercise. So this case study that we have is for Greenway Farms. Shannon Dill, who's hosting today, and Ben Beal, one of our colleagues, wrote up this business plan, essentially a fictional business plan for this fictional Greenway Farms. It's available on the website. It's a wonderful resource. And so in this fictional farm, John and Mary Green, they have a vegetable farm, and they and their daughter Julie run it. Julie would like to take over to work full-time on the farm in the future and maybe take it over someday. They have 25 acres of vegetables. They sell currently all of their vegetables direct market. That means they sell them directly to the consumer. They don't sell them wholesale to a distributor who then takes them to a grocery store. They sell their vegetables to people at their farm stand, through a CSA, at farmers markets, direct to restaurants, that kind of thing. They're coming up on their second growing season. They've had one full growing season. They're coming up on their second. So far, let's see, if you look up at the top of the screen, there's a little tab that says Case Study, and you should, I believe, be able to access it. I'll show it to you. It's only a page long. It gives information about this fictional farm. So you should be able to download this and have it available to look at as well. And so they've been farming for 1 year. Now they're in their second season, and they're considering new enterprises. They're only farming part-time because both John and Mary work off of the farm. Mary handles most of the selling and the marketing during the summer vacation because she teaches. John tends to do most of his work on the production side of the farm. Julie also does a lot of production work and wants to take over the farm 10 years from now. And they have hired seasonal help as needed to fill in. John grew up on a farm, so he has some farming experience from growing up on a grain and dairy farm. But now they're growing vegetables on their farm. They are very proud of the unique and wholesome produce they produce, and they're committed to being sustainable stewards of the land. They want, in the second year, to expand their production of specialty greens, so lettuces, kale, greens like that, from $4,000 net, so that's after expenses, to $8,000. So they want to double their income from specialty greens, and they want to explore 2 new enterprises, baby vegetables and raspberries. And today we're going to zoom in on that raspberries example. They currently direct market to local consumers and restaurants on the eastern shore of Maryland, and they're considering expanding to wholesale sales as well. So I'm going to move away from this scenario. I think you should be able to download it and have it available. I'm going to now move to the worksheet. So this is where we start filling in that table that we talked about, the SWOT table, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So thinking about Greenway Farms, thinking about potentially expanding into raspberry production, I'd like you to think about what strengths and resources Greenway Farms has that are relevant to raspberry production internal to their farm and team, and then start putting in the chat box a couple of examples of strengths. So I'm going to type that up as a question. So you should be able to see underneath the list of panelists on the right, there's a box that says chat, and you can send to all participants is important so we can all see. Send in, think about and write down what you see as strengths of Greenway Farms. They have a lot of land. Yes, they have 25 acres, and we are growing diversify direct marketed vegetables. That's a pretty good amount. They own the land. They have an existing market outlet. Ah, this is awesome. Thank you. Thank you all for participating. This is good. Experience. They have experience. They have access to seasonal labor. They have existing markets. John has previous experience farming. They all have a year of experience farming. They own their land. That's really important. They're an established farm. That's awesome. I'm going to wait just a minute if anyone else has any other strengths they want to add. Good working relationship. That's really important. That's something I try to emphasize in particular to beginning farmers, that it's really rare to find all the skills that you need to farm in one human being. Often one farming partner does a lot of the marketing and one does a lot of the production. So if you don't have some of the skills, it's important to build a team that has them and work well together. Outside income is a strength as well, yes. They're only farming part-time, but that means they have a steady source of income right now from their outside farm jobs. All right, so now I'm going to ask you to think about what weaknesses does Greenway Farms have? Yes, the off-farm jobs limit how much time they can farm. That's a good question. That's a good question for them to consider. With the existing enterprises that they have, are they kind of at their maximum effort to maintain that enterprise? Do they have enough time and land to produce something new? They've never grown raspberries before. That's really important. So they don't have experience and knowledge about raspberry production. The need for occasional hired labor, that's really important with a fruit crop, especially something as delicate as raspberries that you need to pick by hand. they might need to hire someone seasonally to pick. Is that labor available? They've been able to hire people in the past. How well will that continue in the future if they increase their need for hiring seasonal pickers? Any other weaknesses before we move on to the next part? Two of you were thinking about the same thing. Is there a market for raspberries or competition in their immediate area? So that's actually segues perfectly into the next couple questions, the things that are kind of external to the farm, competition and market. So let's zoom in. Raspberries are very perishable. Yes, that is exceedingly important, especially once we start thinking about whether it's worth expanding from direct marketing to wholesale. All right, so let's start thinking about, and in particular related to this raspberry option, what are the opportunities available to Greenway farms, external to their farm, like markets, related to raspberries in particular? Jams and jellies. This could be a potential. Raspberries open the opportunity of making value-added products, which then would be shelf-stable. There are thornless varieties of raspberries. Yes, that makes it much easier to pick. Oh, and they could then potentially expand into a pick-your-own agritourism crop. Health and nutritional value. Yes, so raspberries offer different vitamins and nutrients than the things they grow already, and there's interest in the market, particularly the direct market, for healthy, nutritional, fresh fruits. Pick your own, again, that agritourism, local value versus imported food. The market, particularly the direct marketed customers, value local produce. Food safety comes into things. That can be a strength and a weakness if they essentially do really well at food safety, and they could maybe market, if they get GAP certified, for example, good agricultural practices, they could market that and say that, you know, we put a lot of work into making sure that your food is safe and we have the certification. It can also be a risk if they don't take the time to think about food safety. Any other opportunities people have thought of? Ice cream. I like that. Yes. Oh man, you could see if there's a nearby dairy that does value-added ice cream and partner with them on a co-branded raspberry ice cream product. That would be pretty cool. So let's think about what external threats our Greenway farm should watch out for as they consider expanding into raspberries. Regulation. Yes. So regulation, value-added, producing those jams and jellies. Jams and jellies, I believe, fall under the cottage food law. So there are rules you have to follow. They're relatively simple compared to some other value-added products. But you do need to make sure your recipe follows specific rules about how much sugar is added to make sure it's safe for people. And you do need to follow the rules on that. Diseases and blight and different species. Yes, different species of raspberry. Birds, all caps, absolutely. Yes. Anytime you're producing fruit, in particular berries, birds are a problem. Deer as well, yes. And so you might want to think about how heavy is the bird pressure where you are. I've seen people try to produce raspberries entirely in a cage, or to keep the birds out, or you have to net over them to keep the birds out. Competition and market demand. Will the market buy enough raspberries to make it worthwhile for you? Will you be able to sell them at a price to cover your costs? Is there anyone in their area growing raspberries already? Is there a pick-your-own farm in their area already? Any other threats? Soil conditions of their farm, yeah. What is the pH? What is the drainage? Where on the farm are they considering planting the raspberries? If there's not, I think you might be saying if there are no pick-your-own farms in the area, why not? Is there a reason? That is one thing to get at, is a very good point when you are considering an enterprise. And if this is a brand new enterprise and no one else is doing it, it might be that you've come up with something very new and you're on the leading edge of a new trend. Or it might be that you're trying to do something that other people have tried previously and they found it to be impossible. So, for example, it might be there are no pick-your-own agritourism farms in their area right now just because no one has taken that plunge yet, or it might be because there are not a large enough population to support a pick-your-own farm, or because perhaps you're in a rural area where people are used to growing their own raspberries, and going to pick someone else's raspberries just isn't exciting and isn't a novelty. So it's worth trying to explore. If there are no agritourism farms right now, why not? Is it because this is something new you could take advantage of, or is it because someone else has tried it and it didn't work for them? You all are awesome. This is a great discussion. I'd like to go back to that shelf life question someone brought up. Raspberries are exceedingly fragile. A lack of time due to other jobs, someone pointed out. I'm not sure when. That is also a weakness. So shelf life of raspberries. Raspberries are exceedingly fragile. Once you pick them, they start to go bad very quickly, and if you handle them even roughly at all, you basically need to handle them with kid gloves, or not actual gloves, but you need to handle them very, very gently, or they bruise and they melt, they get wet, they collapse. Raspberries are a little finicky. So that's something very important to consider if they want to pick them themselves, or hire pickers and then have them be part of their direct marketing. So that's difficult. They're going to need to charge a price that will factor in the fact that they're going to have a lot of loss of product. I mean, if they're picking them themselves and selling them to their direct market customers, it might mean that they want to go the pick your own route rather than picking them and selling them, because then the customer comes and picks them and they get them as fresh as possible, and they're responsible for picking them gently. That might be better than trying to pick a very fragile fruit. However, you could also consider that raspberries being very fragile might be an advantage as well, because if you go into the grocery store, you try and buy raspberries, it's very hard to find really high quality raspberries in a grocery store because, as we said, they fall apart very fast. So that can be a draw to your direct market. If it gets around that your farm stand has the best, really good fresh raspberries, and people realize that they can't get them anywhere else, if you do it successfully, it could be a draw, it could be a strength. But then that also might preclude the wholesale option that they're considering. Raspberries just might not be a good crop to use to get into wholesale. It's difficult to pick them and then they fall apart. So if they're exploring wholesale, they might want to do that with the specialty greens that they've been producing already. They know how to do it. They're a little bit more durable than raspberries. So this is an example of how you can use a SWOT analysis with your own enterprises, the enterprises that you're considering, to analyze your farm's strengths and weaknesses and the opportunities and threats that the enterprises you're considering offer. And you can do it for several different potential enterprises and compare and try and see which one seems like the best fit for you and your farm. And always remember to go back to your goals and why you're farming to begin with. I'm going to show you one more document before we go into questions. So there, up at the top, there's this tab that says links to learn more. And I've got links to several places where you can learn more information. Actually, let me go back to the slides. I've got one more slide I wanted to show you. All right. So the SWOT, this is just one tool you can use to assess potential enterprises. There are a lot of them that will give you different pieces of information. One is called an enterprise budget. That's essentially going through and doing the math to figure out, to estimate. If it's a potential enterprise, it's really only an estimate, to estimate your cost of production and the price that you can sell the product at, and then compare compare your cost of production and the wage you want to pay yourself with the different prices that you're considering, to see what price you would need to sell the product at in order to pay yourself a wage and cover your expenses, and ideally make a profit. So an enterprise budget is a tool that you use to do that. It's essentially a very small piece of the finances of your business plan. It's a good way to get into that finances. If you feel like a whole business plan is a little intimidating, it's a good place to start. A market assessment is, we talked about, will people in their area buy raspberries? Do they want to buy raspberries? Do they want to come to a pick your own farm? A market assessment is something you can do to assess the possibilities of marketing this enterprise. You can survey your current customers, you can survey potential customers, you can look at different population centers and find out information about their demographics. You can assess your competition and your potential market outlets. So I'm going to give you some more resources to learn about both of these tools and a lot of other stuff as well. And I know some of you probably are particularly interested in learning about specific enterprises, which we did not cover today. So we've got some more information about that here as well. So there are three main resources I'm going to show to you. One is the Beginning Farmer Success website that I plugged at the beginning of this presentation. It has a whole lot of information. But in particular, that First Steps to Farming tab has a guidebook for beginning farmer business planning. And it has essentially a mock business plan for the Greenway Farms case study, which is really wonderful and helpful to look through. And it also has an interactive enterprise selection tool where you can go through and answer questions, kind of like those fun online surveys, about different potential enterprises and see which one might or might not work for you. Or if you're considering one of them, start to think a little more strategically about it using that tool. Ag Marketing is another website that UMD Extension, Ginger Myers actually heads up this one. It covers all kinds of ag marketing stuff. It would be a great place to look up to learn more about doing a market analysis. And it has a really helpful section on different alternative enterprises and in particular value-added products. So if you're curious about the food safety rules and the regulations related to value-added products, that's the best place to start learning about them. There are different agencies that govern them, and they are very helpful, but their written materials are not always as clear as even they would like them to be. So this is a good place to start reading about it in a more a non-technical way. The Maryland Rural Enterprise Development Center, their website has a lot of business planning information, and they also have a really great section that I recommend called Specialty Modules, where they essentially feature different trending enterprises in Maryland. They've got a lot of stuff. They talk about breweries and distilleries, cottage food rule, honey and other bee products, hops, mushrooms, organic products, horse boarding, specialty vegetables, agritourism, and a couple other things. So that's a really helpful website. If you're interested in enterprise budgets in particular as another tool to assess specialty crop enterprises, Shannon Bill, who hosted today, recorded a very helpful webinar on that that's available in the archive of previous Mid-Atlantic Women in Agriculture webinars. And the business planning guide in the Beginning Farmer website also has a lot of information about enterprise budgeting. I think I forgot to put on here, I'll send Shannon an updated version. If you're interested in cut flowers in particular, there's another website that Extension has that has more information about that in particular. Let me I'll get it to Shannon and she'll get it out to you. I think if you want to wait around, I'll pull it up while we're talking about questions too. So I'll find the website for the cut flower stuff while we're talking questions. So if you have any questions about how to use SWOT as a tool to assess an enterprise, if you have other questions, I can definitely help answer questions about using SWOT. If you have other questions about specialty crops, I will do my best to answer them. So if you could put your questions into the chat now, I'll go find that other website.
All right, any other questions for Nia? We have the chat pod or the Q&A down at the bottom, either one you can use.
All right, specific examples on how to survey potential customers. So if you're farming already, for example, in our case study, they have potential customers, so they might have a list of them. They have current customers, so they might be able to survey those. If you don't have customers yet, if you're just starting out, one thing, let's see, Alexandra, would you be able to tell me, are you thinking about selling things at a farmer's market? Are you thinking about marketing things, direct marketing or wholesale? If you're considering farmers markets and online, okay, awesome. So if you're considering selling things at a farmer's market, one thing I highly recommend, one of the beginning farmers that I've met, she did this, and I think she's brilliant for doing it. What she did is she went to every farmer's market she could drive to, and she went in person and she looked around and she looked at what people were selling. She looked at which stalls she found appealing and what they were selling at them, and she also looked and about what they were charging for things. And she also looked at the customers and what they were buying and which stalls they were stopping at. So that's kind of an informal, almost spy-like way you can assess markets if you're considering farmers markets. You could also, let's see, if you want to talk to people directly, if you're targeting a specific farmer's market, what you could do is maybe ask the farmer's market manager and say, I'm a beginning farmer. I'm interested in applying to become a member of your farmer's market. I was wondering if you would be willing to send a survey to, so here's what I'm considering selling. Do you have someone at the farmer's market who's selling it already? Would you accept a new vendor selling this? Some farmer's markets have rules that say they only have a certain number of different products to prevent over competition in one area to make it worth the farmer's while to be at the farmer's market. So you could go to the farmer's market vendor and say, I'm considering selling jams and jellies at your farmer's market. Would you accept a new vendor selling that? And would you be willing to send a survey to some of, would it be all right if I showed up at the market with a survey? Yeah, so if you ask the farmers, I would ask the manager in advance if that would be okay. But that would be a great idea to show up at the market with a survey to ask the farmers market shoppers. Absolutely. And if you're willing to put a little marketing money into it, you might be able to say, get like a little, a dollar or two in farmers market dollars for the people who participate in your survey to go and then spend at other vendors if you want to incentivize it, if you think you're not going to get people to answer the questions otherwise. But most people at farmers markets, they're there to have a good time as well as shop, so they might be willing to talk with you. Absolutely. Any other questions about assessing specialty crop enterprises or about specialty crops in general?